very welcome back to Ireland AM for your Thursday morning. Now, the question, what would a united Ireland actually look like, and are we anywhere near prepared for that kind of conversation?
Here to discuss his new book, exploring the arguments for and against Irish unity, is journalist Sam McBride. Sam, thank you so much for joining us.
How are you, Sam?
Good morning, thanks.
You've written this with Fintan, the venerable Fintan O'Toole. So can you tell us, I think the name kind of suggests, but tell us about the book.
So it's both of us arguing both sides of this massive question that has dominated certainly politics north of the border where I come from, but actually the history of this island. You know, this has been central to its politics for the last century or more, and yet often we don't really get beyond, are you for it or against it, or should it happen or should it not? And so what we're trying to look at in quite a quirky way, I suppose, is if it was to happen, what would be brilliant and what would be awful? What would we gain? What might we lose? How could we do this? And how could we do it without people dying, without screwing up the economy, without making people's lives worse? And that's really interesting. It's very different to what I do as a journalist day to day, because it's being quite partisan. You're arguing for one thing and then you're flipping it around and arguing exactly the opposite case. And in that way, overall, it's completely neutral. It's part of a big academic project, the Aaron's project, which is looking at these questions of the future of the island. But they brought us in as people who are not academics to try to, talk in normal language to normal people and think it through in a way that certainly I hadn't thought about it before.
There's the two of you. This is, by the way, this question. It's quite a simple question that's been put, like black or white, and certainly in our presidential election, it came up constantly. It comes up now. Every election, every general election, everyone has been asked the question. Yeah. What's your position on it? There's two of you writing this, yourself and Fintan. You're obviously based in Belfast, one side of the border, and Fintan is on this side. Ideologically, would you have had different views and brought different views to the writing of the book?
So I think that this wouldn't really have worked if either of us were massively ideological people. I mean, we were both very comfortable simply arguing both sides because, we've all got our views in society. But as a journalist, I hold my own personal politics pretty lightly. I vote. I think it's important to vote. But I think that if you're really driven by a partisan agenda, you're not going to be very good as a journalist generally, because you're going to turn down all sorts of stories that are awkward for your side, if you like. And so it's never really been the sort of journalism that I have liked. I knew, even though I'd actually never met Fintan before we came together to do this book, from reading his stuff, I knew that he was intellectually curious about this. He would do a good job in both sections. It's almost like being a barrister. You've got a client, you've got to argue the best possible case for unity and then turn around and do exactly the opposite. And I loved that. It was a lot of fun to do.
And some of the things that, because as we said, it's an ideological question for so many people, but you looked at very practical things in this as well. Like you were talking about toll roads.
Yeah, if you're making the case for Irish unity, I suppose the big picture is that it's a phenomenally exciting thing. This is creating an entirely new country. It's not simply bolting Northern Ireland onto the south. It's about basically dissolving both states, throwing everything up in the air and saying, why can we not do it that way? Let's change it. Should the capital be in Armagh? Should it be in Cork? Should it be in Belfast? What sort of parliamentary system should we have? Should we have devolved assemblies in the different provinces? Everything is there. However, if you're of a risk-averse disposition, that terrifies you, quite possibly because you think, well, if everything's up in the air, we've got this very successful country, certainly in the Republic, and to an extent north of the border, these are two societies that largely work. What if we break it?
I'd just like to say over there, Kevin was putting his hands up going, obviously the capital would be in Cork. I'm assuming that's what Kevin was shouting out there. You're talking about things, because we stay within the ideological realm, and we go back to the Civil War all the time. We go back to the occupation. We go back to the flight of the Earls. But you've just said, really practical things. Do you think that comes into it enough when we talk about this question?
No, but I think that for a growing section of people north of the border and south of the border, that is what's going to swing it. And the surprising thing to me, as a northern journalist who's much more familiar with the politics of Belfast, the very partisan way that lots of people think about this, I was surprised that the hardest bit of this to write is making the argument for unity to southern voters on practical points. Because my view as a northern journalist is that the south, when I look at the data, it's booming economically, culturally. It's a confident society. It's moving in the right direction. Now, lots of people will say that's not what we recognise. People have difficulties in their lives, of course they do. But the data is really clear. The gross domestic product, the wealth of the South is 10 times that of the North, with about 2.5 times the population. It's astronomically beyond what we're used to on our side of the border. But you can turn all of that around. If it's doing so well, to a pragmatic person who has maybe come here from another country, who doesn't have the history of thinking, we want to get rid of British rule or any of that sort of old ideology, why change it if it's doing so well? That was a difficult thing to argue, but I did.
There's a lot
you
of,
did, yeah.
There's a lot of, it's worth noting you both two authors doing both sides.
Yeah.
It's not that one of you takes one side and one of you takes another. The other thing that comes up a lot, that the subject, cost. What would the cost in a referendum saying in, out, yes, no, it's happening? What would it cost if it was a yes?
So it would cost billions. That's the only thing we can say with confidence. The lowest estimate that any sort of major academic has come up with is about €2.5 billion per year extra for the South to pay for taking on Northern Ireland in the short term. And the positive case for that is that over time, as the North became more integrated, that bill would go down. The worst case scenario is over 20 billion a year extra, major drop in living standards to pay for that, lots more taxation. And one of the interesting things about the Southern population is that when they're polled in this very consistently, they say, we love the idea of Irish unity. Let's have a united Ireland. It's a great thing. Yeah. Then you say to them, what about changing the flag? No. What about changing the anthem maybe to make some Northern Unionists feel a bit more comfortable? Absolutely not. What about joining the Commonwealth again? Maybe, something purely symbolic? No way. What about paying more tax? Absolutely not. So I think once you get into the detail of this, a lot of people haven't really thought about it very deeply. When they do, we don't really know what they're going to say.
There was one thing in it that when you're travelling across Northern Ireland, you get no tolls. If you're travelling from Belfast to Cork, you pay €19.
You're very exercised by tolls.
It drives me mad. Anyway, public-private partnership? We've paid for them already. Also, there is another thing in this about people live 2 years longer in the Republic than they do in the North, even though we talk about the NHS so much and things like that. So when you look at politicians, our former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, he has said in his life he expects to see a united Ireland. We know that Mary Lou McDonald expects to see that, whereas on the other side, if you look at some of the unionists, they'd be absolutely, this is not going to happen. Do you think in your lifetime, Sam, that we will see a united Ireland?
So I honestly don't know, and I'm not dodging the question. I think I will see a border poll, but I don't know how that will go. And the reason I say that is that if you think back just 10 years into the past from where we are right now, think about how much has changed in the world. So we've had major war in Europe, we've had a major pandemic, we've had Donald Trump elected, we've had Brexit. Nobody thought any of those things were happening 10 years ago. So once you start projecting what's going to happen more than 10 years into the future, it's almost pointless. This will come down to practical issues for centrist voters. They're the swing voters north of the border who will decide this. It will not be about emotion for those people, but for a lot of other people, it will be about something much deeper.
It's worth it because it's not really a black and white question.
No.
And ahead of any poll, it's definitely worth a read. It's absolutely fascinating.
And look at that handsome picture there. I mean,
a pair of stunners.
Look at that.
They look like a boy band.
They do look like you.
I'm deeply uncomfortable right now.
It's like they're off to Amble. Do you know they're off to see an Amble gig? I love it.
It's called For and Against United Ireland. Fintan O'Toole and Sam McBride, thank you so much for it.
Thanks for joining us, Sam. Really appreciate it.